body. Okay. So yeah, so just an example. So you see the soft tissue space behind, in front of the vertebra here. You can see the tracheal air shadow here. Clearly, there is a large collection here. Yeah. And if you draw the lines, the anterior vertebral body line, you will know that there is loss of alignment of the vertebra, and this is a fracture dislocation of the neck. So these things don't miss out on the X-ray. Just a few quick points on what to look at on the X-ray. We also look at the height of the disc and whether the facet joints are arthritic. But these are the important. The previous ones that I mentioned are important that you don't want to miss out on. Okay, so we're looking at 4 clinical scenarios today. We're looking at acute neck pain. We are looking at chronic neck pain. We are looking at neck pain with myelopathy, neck pain radiating down the arm, or a cervical disc causing neck pain and arm pain. We will cover next week. So we're dealing with 3 things only today: acute neck pain, chronic neck pain, and neck pain with myelopathy. So acute neck pain, just like we mentioned for acute back pain, acute neck pain, very common issue. You can get out of bed in the morning, probably having slept in a bad position. Typically, these neck pains last, they come to you with neck pain, either it started immediately in the morning or a few days duration. Does not typically radiate down the arm, but just be aware that they can radiate to the interscapular region also. Movements of the neck may be very painful, and they may hold the neck tilted to one side, and typically neurological examination is normal. So this is the acute neck pain that even most of us have probably experienced at some stage. Fortunately, the natural history, like in acute low back pain, the natural history is very favorable. The symptoms subside spontaneously in a majority of patients. Scans and X-rays not usually needed. So in adults with acute neck pain, scans and X-rays not usually needed, and the management would be NSAIDs and some physiotherapy if necessary. So NSAIDs, some people, I normally advise my patients to get some sessions of physio because the physios sometimes are able to give them quick relief by just releasing the muscles that are in spasm. So that is acute neck pain, very common thing. So don't over investigate them. The second one I'm going to talk about is chronic neck pain. This is actually a pain in the neck. So duration of weeks, months, years. Just yesterday, I saw a lady who came to me with neck pain of 3 years duration, increase in the last 3 months. They may radiate up to the shoulders, but do not typically radiate down the arms. They're typically aggravated by activities and certain postures, and the neurological examination may be normal. So this is a common thing. The causes are many. So in youngsters, in Bangalore, we have this entire IT industry with people sitting in front of computers for long periods of time. So what happens is that if you sit in an abnormal or non-ergonomic posture, stooping forwards like that, once you start stooping forward, then your muscles in the neck have to work harder to keep your neck in that position. But if you're sitting straight, then the gravity lines pass straight through and your muscles don't have to work as hard. As opposed to when you're bending forwards, when your neck muscles have to work harder to keep your neck in that position. And over a period of time, the muscles fatigue, and then that causes pain. The second one is in elders, which may be because of wear and tear in the discs or arthritis in the facet joints in the back of the neck. And these facet joints are synovial joints like your knee joints and your hip joints, which can wear out with age. Stress and anxiety, I think, plays a huge role in neck and back pain, especially neck pain. And for chronic neck pain, I think it is worthwhile getting some tests done just to find out what is the cause of the pain. Okay, before we go on to treatment. So I think it's worthwhile in patients who are coming to you with neck pain of many months duration to at least find out if there's anything going on that can be addressed directly. So I'm just going to share the details of a study that we had done a study that we had done in our hospital. So we looked at nurses across 11 hospitals across India, and we were looking at the prevalence of neck and back pain in nurses. So we know that nurses are a high risk group for spinal pains for a variety of reasons, because of the kind of work they do, standing and twisting and supporting patients and bending over patients and things like that. So we found that around 15% of the nurses had neck pain either most of the time or all the time in the last 6 months. And back pain, around 25% of them had back pain either most of the time or all the time. So that's quite a serious quite a significant prevalence of neck and back pains. And then we asked them questions of trying to find out what are the risk factors that can potentially predispose them to these neck and back pains. So we looked at gender, we looked at age, we looked at BMI, we looked at the educational status, is it more in ANMs, is it more in BSc nurses, is it more in MSc nurses? We looked at the time taken to travel to and fro from work. We looked at the hours spent doing sports and exercise. We looked at the area of work in the hospital, whether there are nurses in the OPD versus OT versus ICU nurses, because their work is quite different. We wanted to know whether that contributes to the prevalence of pain. And then we also asked them whether whether they've had sadness or depression in the last 6 months. So that is for back pain. And this is for neck pain. So we asked them the same questions again. So we found that there was no correlation between gender, age, BMI, educational level, travel to and time taken to travel to and fro from work. We also looked at mode of travel to and fro from work, whether they're going by bikes or by cars or by buses. There was no correlation with the number of hours spent doing exercises and sports or recreational activities. There was no correlation of the prevalence of neck and back pain with the area of work in the hospital. There was only one factor that showed a significant p-value and a high relative risk. That was the self-reported sadness and depression. So we found that the nurses who said that they were sad and depressed over the last 6 months had a very high prevalence of neck and back pain. So what I'm trying to say is that, assessment and treatment of mental health issues, I'm not saying psychiatric issues, but stress and anxiety should form a part of the multidisciplinary management of chronic neck and back pain, just because they are a significant trigger for perpetuation and chronicity of back pain. So something to remember. So this is a study that we've done recently, and it's been sent off some journals for publication. So coming back to neck pain, chronic neck pain. So what are the options we have? So I think worthwhile, like I said earlier, worthwhile getting x-rays and scans done just to know what you're dealing with if it's chronic pain. But for acute pain, there is no need to get any scans or x-rays done. So start off in a step ladder manner. So the first line of, I'm talking about chronic neck pain. So first line of treatment would be medications, physiotherapy, and counseling. Okay. So the other thing that we know with important thing with chronic pain is multi-modality treatment is the one that works. So giving just medications or only physio or only counseling, does not really work as well as multi-modality treatment for chronic pain. So I think a combination of physiotherapy, a combination of counseling. So we have a pain counselor who works with our team, and many of my patients coming to me with chronic pains who don't have any surgical indications, I offer them, I advise them to meet the pain counselor, and invariably there is some background of stress and anxiety, which which treatment of which will definitely help with their pain. Coming to medications, we know that NSAIDs can be given for short durations of time, but not a great option for long-term pain. So we tend to give a lot of non-NSAID medications, pregabalin, gabapentin, duloxetine, and things like that for chronic pain. Okay. So if these things, these non-surgical modality, non-interventional modalities don't work, and if the facets are looking quite arthritic in an elderly person with difficulty in extension of the neck, then fluoroscopy guided facet injections are a good option. They work pretty well. It's a OPD walk-in walk-out procedure, takes all of 10 minutes. If nothing works and they have a surgical indication, then surgery can be offered either from the front or the back, whatever. But for chronic pain, I think, if there is no surgical indication, and most of the time for just plain neck pain, unless there is a significant deformity in the neck, most of them can be treated non-surgically. So that's the surgery. It can be done. You can put in screws and plates from the back, from the front, lots of options surgically. But that is if they have a surgically treatable problem based on the X-rays and MRI scan. So like I was telling you earlier, psychological evaluation and counseling should form part of the treatment for chronic spinal pain. Very important. And the other thing that, we miss with our younger patients is ergonomic education. So I normally encourage them to either Google. Anyway, they like to Google everything anyway. So I advise them to Google ergonomic workstations. So, there are lots of good material on the internet that tells you what kind of chair you should use, what kind of table you should use, what height your monitor should be at, and things like that. And if they have sitting jobs that require them to sit in front of a computer for long periods of time, it's terribly important that the chairs, the tables, the monitors are all ergonomically designed and placed. So most offices now have ergonomic training. Most offices have ergonomic officers that teach employees the right position to sit and stand, and right position for the monitor and things like that. But there's something that you should always emphasize on. So coming back to non-operative treatment, so this is the same slide that I put for non-operative treatment for chronic back pain. So we know that multidisciplinary rehabilitation is very effective. We know that exercises are very effective. There is no role for traction. We don't use traction for any kind of neck pain anymore. We used to use it in the past, 15 or 20 years ago. Don't use it now because it has not been shown to be effective. I don't normally advise patients to have any form of electrotherapy, either in the form of ultrasound or TENS or shortwave. So most of the patients, I don't know, like you're already aware, I don't normally tell my physios what to do. So I leave it to them to take a decision regarding the right treatment to give. But more often than not, I think it's a combination of, myofascial releases, maybe some dry needling, maybe some exercises that eventually get them better. Okay, so bed rest. So these are the same things that I spoke to you about earlier regarding the non-operative measures and what the effects are. I'll go through it again because I can't tell you how important it is to know what works and what doesn't work. But before we go into that, we look at some of the red flags. So if anybody below the age of 20 or over the age of 70 develops sudden onset neck pain, should take it quite seriously. If the neck pain is following a fall or injury, take it seriously. If it's associated with fever, loss of weight, and loss of appetite, look at it a little more carefully. If there is worsening arm pain, numbness, weakness, bladder problems, difficulty in walking, clumsiness of the hands, please take it seriously. Don't treat it as any other neck pain because there may be some neural compression. Night pain, something to be taken seriously. And symptoms not settling down with medications, I think should be taken a little more seriously. At least consult a specialist in these matters. So yeah, coming down back to those non-operative treatment options. So cervical collar, I very rarely use cervical collar. I use cervical collar in some of my patients who had surgery, but otherwise acute cervical disc herniation causing radiculopathy, I give them a collar for a few weeks. but that's about it. For chronic neck pain, I don't give them a collar. What happens with long-term use of the collar is that the muscles tend to become weaker, tend to go to sleep, and then they don't support your neck as well. So it's important to strengthen the muscles of the neck so that the neck muscles support the spine rather than an external collar. So we see so many patients walking around with these fancy collars anyway. So bed rest. So just like in acute low back pain, there is no role for bed rest, no role for enforced bed rest for neck pains either. So I tell my patients that they can, do their normal activities. For chronic pain, I don't put any restrictions at all. If there is severe acute neck pain, I tell them, take it easy for a couple of days till the pain settles down, and then you can get back into normal activities and avoid the gym till, for the acute neck pains, I tell them to avoid any gym and, exercises, non-physiotherapy exercises till the pain settles down. Okay, traction, like we said, hardly any role for traction in neck pains. They don't work. I think it's just a placebo. Physiotherapy exercises, good option for neck pains, and I think all of us who sit in front of computers or sit in consultation rooms, I think it's a good idea to do some neck exercises regularly. Even our chances of having neck pain will settle down. So no role for shortwave ultrasound TENS. There is no evidence. There is no evidence. You still being used very commonly, but in the face of insufficient evidence, I think we should just not do it. We have better options. So this is, I've shown you this before. So medications, first line of treatment may be NSAIDs, but we know that we cannot use NSAIDs for longer periods of time because of the side effects associated with it. So anticonvulsants like gabapentin, pregabalin, and antidepressants like amitriptyline and even duloxetine are some things that can be used for slightly longer periods of time. And they're useful not only in neuropathic pain, they're also useful in axial neck and back pains. Injections we spoke about. So facet injections in the neck is something that we do occasionally. This is for patients whose MRI scans and X-rays show facet arthritis, who don't do well, who are not improving very well with physiotherapy and medications, and we offer them some facet injections in the neck, and most of them do pretty well with these injections. So if it does come to surgery, there are many options. You can do them from the front, you can do them from the back, you can put plates, you can replace, like knee and hip replacement. We have disc replacement also in the neck and lower back. So lots of options are there. So that is about chronic neck pain. Neck pain with cervical radiculopathy from a disc herniation we will discuss in the next week. But this is something that you need to know. This is cervical neck pain associated with cervical myelopathy. So radiculopathy means dysfunction of the nerve roots, radical. Myelopathy means dysfunction of the spinal cord. So if there is compression on the spinal cord causing dysfunction of the spinal cord, it is referred to as myelopathy. And typically, the signs that you see are upper motor neuron signs below the level of the lesion. So if you have cervical myelopathy in the neck, you're likely to have upper motor neuron signs in the lower limbs, which is increased tone, brisk reflexes, and upgoing plantars. So the three common things that you see. Cervical myelopathy can also cause clumsiness of the hands. So they have difficulty in buttoning their clothes, they have change in handwriting, they have difficulty in using their hands to eat and even hold a glass. So the clumsiness of the hands is something that really disables them. The other thing that they have is poor balance while walking. So we either get most of them will be able to tell you that they feel a loss of balance. And we can also test it by doing something called a tandem walk, making them walk heel to toe in a straight line. And if they are unable to do it, well, you need to look at myelopathy as one of the causes. So MRI scan is very clear in these cases. You will see signal changes in the cervical spine. I'll talk about MRI scans in the next session. Just what myelopathy looks like and what radiculopathy looks like. What disc herniation looks like. So if you have signal changes in the spinal cord, it means that the cord is showing some early signs of damage. The cervical. So this is how it looks. So causes could be many. It could be either due to a protruding disc from the front, or ligaments from the back, or joints, the facet joints encroaching onto the to narrow the canal. So the pathophysiology of it is very varied. There's some amount of cord ischemia that occurs because of the compression, and it alters the vascular architecture with some endothelial cell disruption. There is some neuroinflammation that occurs and some neuronal apoptosis. So the end result of it is the cord signals don't go down normally, and cervical myelopathy is a surgical problem because uh, a large percentage of cervical myelopathies tend to progress, and it is better that we get them early to operate on rather than later when they become wheelchair bound. So cervical myelopathy is something that needs to be recognized, and what you're looking at is upper motor neuron signs in the lower limbs. You're looking at clumsiness of the hands, and you're looking at gait alterations. And if patients with neck pain have these, an MRI scan is mandatory. It will show whether there is cervical myelomalacia or not. Myelopathy is the clinical condition. Myelomalacia is the MRI finding that you see. And if there is moderate to severe myelopathy, surgery is mandatory because it can get worse. If there is mild myelopathy, then you can probably, there is a debate between surgery and non-operative, and follow them up very closely to see whether they're getting worse, and if they're getting worse, then surgery again. So those are the options that you're looking at. So this just a few pictures I have here. This is a this is a young male who came to us with clumsiness of the hands, difficulty in walking, and you can see the X-ray looks reasonably okay, but you see on the MRI the amount of compression on the cord, and you can see these white patches on the cord. That is called myelomalacia. It just means that the cord is, there's some edema in the cord, or maybe more significant damage to the cord, and the treatment for that is surgical. So if the compression is typically from the front, like in this patient, we do remove that whole vertebra, replace it with the cage, and fix it with plates and screws. So that's a surgery from the front of the neck. Whereas this is another 65-year-old lady who came with similar symptoms, inability to walk, clumsiness of the hands. You can see the significant narrowing of the spinal canal. A couple of places, you can see there's some change in the signals in the normal black, that is the normal color. You can see some hyper intense or those white signals in the cord, which signify that there is some early damage to the cord. And this is something that definitely requires surgery. Since the patient's neck was also bent forwards like this, or kyphotic like this, we decided to go in from the back, realign the cervical spine, and then fix it with screws and rods. So we do a laminectomy at the same stage to take the compression off the cervical cord. And this lady was able to walk the next day from a wheelchair bound position. So some of them tend to do very well. It's how quickly you can go in and operate on them and take the compression off the cord. And with that, we come to the end of the talk. I haven't taken too much time.